People, I go by the name Sotade Olusegun. In today's live session, I'm going to actually, treat with you two powerful derivations. So the first one is what I call the derivation of time energy wave function. And then the second one is derivation of formula of everything. These two derivations are powerful. So the formula of everything deals with unification of quantum mechanics to classical mechanics. So it actually, transits right from the substrate dimension into the higher dimension. But then I use this time energy wave model to, like, zoom in on the quantum mechanics to know what is actually going on, for me to actually get the flipping mechanism, and with that I'm able to deduce that the unification is actually from substrate. It's more, the unification is more or less like transition from the substrate dimension to higher dimension, and that is what I call complex system. So now this flipping mechanism is everywhere in the universe, and I call it the signature of Almighty God. It is everywhere. And so today we're going to, dive deeply into it. Well, don't be surprised that these two derivations were actually, derived in my research publications. And so we have to quickly touch on the research publications so that you can get to understand this quite all right. I will briefly explain, based on my research publication, for you to have idea of what this is all about. This is going to be quite insightful and informative, and so I implore you to watch this till the end. It's going to be quite informative. So now what I'm going to do next is I will just have to briefly go to I want to briefly go to my research. Okay. Okay, let me start with this. I want to quickly open my research publication so that we can have idea of what this is all about. So I want to make it bigger a little bit. So now the first research publication, I call it the time theory of the universe. And so it was published, as you can see, October 2021, 10th of October 2021. Now it is titled The Time Theory of the Universe. So now this publication, I actually use, the differential calculus of Sir Isaac Newton, merge that with the of Albert Einstein to model the relationship between time, energy, and mass. So by actually using chain rule, I'm able to, model the three, I mean, I'm able to model the relationship between the three entities, which are time, energy, and mass. So now I will briefly go to, I don't want to bore us with, the article, like the content of the article, just to start, telling stories about, the whole thing. I just want to briefly go to the derivation. Now, right here, you can see here, I have the formula of everything. So now, if I'm to just start from here, I can then start by saying the space of time interval is the necessitating factor for movement, rotation, gravitation, speed, action, growth, balance, hosting of moving entity, emanation of existence, vibration, wave radiation, and so on, then it is safe to say time is the movement of energy. It is safe to say time is the movement of energy. So, in parentheses, I have electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. These are the forces that are uh, that are applicable at quantum level. They can actually work together at quantum level. So, and energy is the movement of gravitation, which is the movement of mass concentrated matter, gravitational force. So now, mathematically, we can say T, which is time, is the function of E, which is energy, where E energy equal to the function of mass. So energy is the gravitational function of mass. So once we have it like that, then it can then be T is the function of gravitational force of mass. So now the mass of heavenly bodies implements gravitational force at mass level, but it is a worth of energy at either speed close to the speed of light or the speed of light. Therefore, we will use the speed of gravitation instead of weight of mass in E equals mc squared to arrive at the speed of the universe, and as well to quantize mass by speed of gravitation that is common to all heavenly bodies. So basically, at quantum level, the phenomenon to be in form of worth. Probably, let me not say at quantum level, I would rather say when you have momentum, then we're going to have worth. So I don't know, we might just decide to call that relativistic worth, rather. You understand? So now, having the first paragraph situation, we need to use chain rule of differential calculus invented by Sir Isaac Newton to implement the moving algorithm of time in relativity to matter, because the speed of time is not fixed but relative. In that case, speed of time could be termed as electromagnetic speed of relativity scaling. So that is what I now call time. Time is electromagnetic speed of relativity scaling. So now by chain rule, we have dt dm equal dt de times de dm. For t is a function of m, let t equal e squared. For t is the function of e, where e equal to m squared plus 1. Therefore, E is the function of gravitational force of matter, which is gm, thus T equal E squared. And so we have E squared to be, in parentheses, m squared plus 1 squared. So now, once we have that like that, then we can just take, the derivation of dt de, and so we're going to have 2 times 1e 2 minus 1, and that will give us 2e. The e dm will give us 2 times 1m raised to power 2 minus 1, and that will give us 2m. By chain rule, we will have it to be the dt dm equal to dt de times de dm, and that will be 2e times 2m, and that will give us 4em. Therefore, dt dm equal 4 in parentheses m squared plus 1m equal to 4m squared plus 4m. Now this 4m squared plus 4m is more or less like, the strong conveying placeholder. Let me just put it like that. While the 4m is weak conveying placeholder. So we now have the placeholder for strong nuclear force and then the weak nuclear force. So to induct E equals mc squared, as E in our 4em of 4 open bracket, in parentheses, m squared plus 1m placeholder, let t equal E squared for t is the function of E, where E equals to square, where is equal to square bracket m dot c squared, then squared. Once we have that, so now we want to use the mass worth to be the speed of gravitation. We want the speed, we want to use the sun's gravitational speed as the watt for mass. And then we're going to use the speed, we're going to use the speed of light also. So now, once we know, things that we want to use, so we can then proceed. We now have the TDM equal to 4em equal to 4 open bracket square bracket. We now have m dot c squared, then squared plus 1. We close the bracket, then m. Now the TDM equal to 4. Now when we now substitute the value, as we already have the structure above, then we're going to use the gravitational speed of sun, which is 274, and that is what we have up here, which is up here. So 274, and then for for c squared, we're going to put the speed of light right there, and that is what we have up here. You can see that as well. So we put the speed of light, we square that, we close the square bracket, we square that plus 1, then close the bracket m. The TDM equal to 4, we open bracket, then square bracket, we have the 274 right there. And the moment we now the moment we now square, just like the square that we have outside the bracket, we're going to have 9.0 times 10 raised to power 16. We close all the brackets, then squared plus 1. We close the bracket, then we have m. Now the TDM equal to 4. Then by the time we multiply 274 with 9.0, we're going to have 6.3 times 10 raised to power 38. So, when we square, we're going to square. Once we square, we apply the square, we're going to have 38. Then plus 1, we close the brackets, then we have m. So now, the TDM will now be 2.5 when we multiply 4 with 6.3, and then we'll now have 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39. So now the power will now be 39 plus 4. We close the bracket, we have m outside. Now by having m outside, when we open the bracket, we're going to have the TDM equal to 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39 m plus 4m. So now we can just substitute the capital U for the constant of for that constant speed of universe, and so we're going to have it to be the TDM equal to capital Um plus 4m. Now this is the derivation of formula of everything. Now the TDM must be there. This is a formula. The reason I decided to use formula is for the fact that there is this inherent asymmetric nature in the universe, which must be explored for us to actually move from substrate dimension to higher dimension, and that transition is what I call complex system. Now right at the higher dimension, we realize that there is something so profound, something that is somehow difficult for us to identify. But then we realize that for us to understand this, to capture this event, we need to actually go, to operate at quantum level. And it is for that reason we're going to have the second derivation, which is the time energy wave function. And that is what we're going to do next. So now dtdm has to be there because that is talking about the curvature of time to the curvature of energy. Now, you see that we didn't use the E, it is the M because it is only the convergence of mass worth that can, cause that curvature that we want. And then right inside it, we have this nested linear solution, which is in form of capital UM plus 4M. This is a linear solution that is being nested right there. Now, this linear solution will give us diagonal trajectory of time, which we, cause for the reaction of that in form of energy. And so we must actually, bridge the divergence because it is from that we now have the divergence of energy to time, which is more or less like the divergence of classical mechanics to quantum mechanics. So now let's explore the next paper. So now we're exploring the second paper. This is the second paper. Okay, so now this is the second paper. And then as you can see, the title is Seeing the Anatomy of Quantum Gravity Through Formula of Everything. This was published in 6th of June 2022. It was published then. So now I'll need to quickly go to that, second derivation. So now this is still about formula of everything, and let me quickly explain. This is the application of formula of everything. This is how you apply it. But then we realize that there is this suspension. So when we now, the answer that we got is this 2.20 times 10 raised to power 41. This is actually for the mass worth of 86 kilograms. We're trying to use the classical mass worth right here to get its, quantum counterpart. So now we realize by expanding this in standard form that we have suspension of 344 to couples of zeros, to many zeros. And then for us to manually annihilate the suspended worth, then we need to do what we have right here. So the suspension, we track it to be 10 raised to power 3 to the edge of, this suspension is towards the curvature of time. And then we realize that the only way we can actually, annihilate this is for us to have that 344 over 10 raised to power 38. So the suspension is actually at 38th position. So once we have that, we can expand that fraction. We have it to be 3.4 times 1 all over 10 raised to power 38. And when we solve that further, the answer is going to be 3.4 times 10 raised to power minus 38. And that is the quantum counterpart of 86 kilogram worth of classical mass. But then let's quickly see the derivation of time energy function. This is what I call time energy function. So now the derivation of this is going to be this what we have, and it is del. I'm actually going to use del, and so this is all about it's all about field. So I'm actually going to use electric field and see what electric field would be in relation to time and energy. And so when you look at this, we have this del times the electric field. We're going to have this momentum, which is going to be inverse of it. So we have this ratio of time derivation to derivation of energy. That's what we have. So now, if we now have the structure to be what we have below, we have del multiplied with, del in parentheses, then we have this electric field. And so we're going to have this derivation of del multiplied to time and then over derivation of energy. That's what we're going to have. So now this del, it might just be in form of coefficients. Probably it might just serve as a placeholder for the constant speed of the universe. But then we have this, and so under it we have the structure further, and then we can then use the constant speed of the universe right here. So we have minus 1 all over capital U squared. And so we now have second derivation of time over second derivation of energy. So now I have to use the constant speed of the universe, because that is the only way we can get to track phenomenon, this inherent phenomenon that we realized when apply formula of everything. So now, the next thing that we're going to do is that we know that what we have up here is more or less like the substrate dimension. So in this case, it might just be 2D. But then we want to, and it is for that reason that we have decided to use del, because del can actually give us this flexibility to this dynamics to deal with multidimensional situation. So we're going to have it in form of divergence, all that. So basically we now have to integrate vector structure in order to have the wave equation in 3 dimensions. So we implement the following, and that is what we have below. So now when you look at this, what we have below, we can actually multiply the del with the del in parentheses multiplied with capital T. The capital T will serve as it will serve as a placeholder, you understand? So equal to, then we have this del multiplied with the del in parentheses multiplied with capital T, which is the placeholder, minus del squared T. So the capital T is a placeholder. So right now we now see that we can actually apply this further by having our electric field in the equation, back in the equation. We collect the like times, and so we have the del multiplied with del in parentheses multiplied with electric field minus del squared electric field equal to, then we have the minus momentum of 1 all over capital U squared, second derivation of T2 over second derivation of T2, second derivation of dE, or second order derivative and all that, you understand? So basically now with this, once we have this like this, then we realize that what we have, the two sides must be equal, because the electric field, it has to be the inverse scaling, or let me say the electric field has to be the time relativistic scaling to energy. So the inverse scaling of time to energy must be equal to the electric field as we have right here. So now we can then take our we can then collect like times take the del squared electric field, subtract that. So if we subtract that from our 1 raised to power capital U squared, second derivation of t over second derivation of E, if we have it like that, then we can equate that to 0, because it's going to be, it's going to be equal to 0. But then, to solve for mass formation of particles as suspended in time relativistic scaling, we have, because by applying formula of everything, we realize that there is this, mass suspension, you understand? So now for us to integrate that into this equation, now have to use the, what is it called, the total relativistic particle with mass in form of m, as we have in the special relativity. So now we have the total energy in form of E squared equal to, we have our momentum multiplied with speed of light squared plus then mass m squared multiplied with c raised to power 4. Okay, now the thing is this. By having the plus right there, we already have that suspension model. Like, by having plus, we allow us to have the suspension of the mass worth. And so once we have this as we have it, then we can integrate that into our equation. But then we will have to change the c, the speed of light, to capital U, because time energy wave function propels at the constant speed of universe, not at the constant speed of light. So we have to substitute capital U in the equation. So now we have what we have below, which is derivation, second derivation over second derivation of total energy. So minus 1 all over capital U squared, then second derivation of time over second derivation of energy. And so we equal this to minus 1 all over h squared. So we now have Planck constant in the equation, because we want to track how the decaying mechanism we quantize the worth towards the singularity of the black hole. So now in parentheses we now have this p squared momentum minus total energy squared all over capital U squared plus m squared, then capital U squared. We have this to be u capital U squared instead of u raised to power 4, because we have this light cone. The light cone, it represents double speed of light in time. So we always have double speed of light in time, and so we want to use that to track down this hidden phenomenon in our equation. So now we have derivation, we have second derivation over second derivation of total energy minus 1 all over capital U squared, then second derivation of time to second derivation of energy. We equal that to minus capital U multiplied with m squared all over h squared. So now what we now get, the total answer that we now get, what we get after this is what we have below. But then there is this issue, because what we have at the left side now, the moment mass is involved, what we have at the left side of the equation is not equal to what we have at the right side. So as a result of that, it's a big issue. So the formula of everything can't be equation based on what I have just discovered right here. So now let's move forward. Okay, so now we can see that based on what I see right here, the what we have at left side is not equal to what we have at right side. You're going to have it in form of the left side we the left side will lift to infinity, but that kind of infinity is somehow weird. It's somehow different from the kind of infinity that we have at the right side, but both are infinities. So now we can okay. All right, so now I'll just continue from here. So like as I was saying, the left side we have it to be in form of infinity, singularity, and then we have the right side to be in form of infinity, another singularity, or rather let me just say singularity to singularity. By having singularity at left side and having singularity at right side, it means that we have singularity to singularity, and that could properly model the Big Bang, from the singularity of Big Bang to singularity of black holes. You understand? So that's the kind of what we have right there. So now we just have to continue and see what we eventually have. Now we can rearrange and easily generalize these to three dimensions by turning this equation into vector equation with wave and particle duality behavior of wave functions. So how are we going to do that? What we're going to do is we have this equation as we have it. We know already that we have singularity to singularity, but then we realize that the initial singularity, which is this Big Bang singularity, is not the same thing as the black hole singularity. So now let's go for that. Now you know, for us to make this to be in three-dimensional formation, so we're going to apply vector to it. We let it act on psi as well. So now let's see what we have. So now we now have our del back. So del squared, we have psi. In parentheses, we have this, rate. We have this r comma t. So right there, we have it in vector format like that. And so then minus our value that we have, which is, because we collect the like times, we collect the like terms, we take this particular term that we have at the right side, we take it to the left side. So now we now take this minus 1 all over capital U squared, then second derivation of time to second derivation of energy to the right side. So by having that, we now have this, plus sign. There is no negative attached to that again. So we have this, we let it act on psi, then we put our r comma t to it, and then to that one as well. So once we have it like this, then we can just let this equation, we let it act on psi. So by making it to act on psi, see what we have. There is something so profound right here. I want you to focus your attention on this particular one. We have second derivation of psi. Now, the psi is the wave function. So this is going to give us the picture of the wave structure based on this equation. It's going to give us, don't forget that by using the constant speed of the universe, like I said, when I derived the formula of everything, by having such huge speed of the universe, we're going to have this transition from substrate dimension to higher dimension. But then, since we have applied the constant speed of the universe in this equation, now see what we have. We have second derivation of psi all over second derivation of total energy minus m squared capital U squared all over h squared, which is the Planck constant. So we let that act on psi as well. So now equal to 1 all over capital U squared multiplied with second derivation of time all over second derivation of psi. Now there is something so profound right here. Can you see the twisting of the wave pattern? The pattern is being twisted. Now what is the ideal picture? What do we have here as ideal picture? What we have here is synonymous to Mobius strip. It is synonymous to Mobius strip, because by having the substrate dimension, which is 2D, transiting into the higher dimension, which is 3D, then there is no more boundary. So the substrate dimension 2D is being unified with the higher dimension, which is 3D. So what I'm trying to say is that, for instance, let's say you have a plain sheet of paper on the ground. You know that plain sheet of paper is a 2D, is in its 2D position. So if you have ants on one side of the paper, the ant will not be able to actually cross to the other side, because the ant will have to cross the border before the ant could explore the other side, and the other side is on the ground. So there is no way the ant can actually explore the other side of that sheet of paper. If you want that ant to explore the other side of the sheet of paper, what you will have to do is for you to lift up that sheet of paper And by lifting up the sheet of paper, you have made it to be in 3D. You have made it to be in 3D, and it is only then the ants can actually cross the border to explore the other side. But then, let's say we have a strip. If you turn the two extreme end of the strip across each other so as to, glue the two extreme ends of the strip, if you then give it half twist and then glue them together, it will form what is known as Mobius strip. And by having that, if you have ants on that object, that ant will not have to cross any border. The ant can actually, explore the 2D, then explore the curvature through the curvature into the 3D without crossing any border. That's what we have here. Now, what we have here is synonymous to the solution of the Nobel laureate of 2025 in physics, the solution that they came up with, which is this quantum tunneling, the unification that we have at superconductive level, you understand. So basically, when you are at superconductive level, there is going to be this unified identity of particles, and that is basically what we have here. Now we know what the problem is. We know that by using the Planck constant to quantize the equation, we now know that there is flipping mechanism, and that flipping mechanism, I call it the signature of Almighty God, because it is everywhere. We have light. We have the speed of light in its multiple before it could be measured in time. And the other part of the speed of light, the other part is being inversely related to it. And that is why we could have, in projector, we have the objects to be projected being flipped. So we have to flip it upright before we could project. And also, if you are observing an object, the original object you are observing in your eyes is flipped. And that is why we have this situation like that. So we have electron, we have positron. The flipped version of electron is the positron. So even in the DNA, in the double helix of DNA, what do we have? There you see that you have the pairing of adenine to thymine, and that will be inversely arranged in the RNA. You have it in the DNA, you have it being cloned in the DNA, and also it will be cloned in the RNA. But then don't forget that the adenine to being paired with thymine, in the RNA, we have adenine being, paired with uracil. You understand? But then if you look at the cytosine, the pairing of cytosine to guanine, we have it being flipped. We have original version. We have the flipped version in the DNA, and then we have original version and the flipped version, just as we have it in the DNA, in the RNA. And then we know, the RNA at time, the RNA is, often moved out of nucleus. You understand? So there is this interconnectivity of dimensions. And so that is the reason this formula of everything is so essential for us to get the reality of the universe. This formula of everything, I've used it to solve so many things already. But then I always use formula of everything without referring to this time energy wave function, because the whole solution of everything is right there. In the formula of everything, we have that unified identity. But the thing is, let me give you the challenge that we have using this time energy wave function. The time energy wave function is not actually giving us the unified identity. We have the two extreme ends of the equation in infinity. You understand? We know that the singularity of the left is different from the singularity of the right. We know that. So there is this break in that transition from substrate dimension to higher dimension. So, but what we're able to get using this is the flipping mechanism, which I call the signature of Almighty God, and at the same time, that is what I call complex system. Now, the complex system is the transition from substrate dimension to higher dimension, and it is that is why I don't usually use this time energy wave function. So if you watch my videos, especially Sotade series, I usually use formula of everything, because in the formula of everything you have the unified identity. You have the transition from substrate dimension to higher dimension. And so now that we know that we have this flipping mechanism, and so we can then be so sure that the reason we could not reconfirm the mass worth of electron the second time is for the fact that we have this instant trajectory of time that we instantly disconnect. If we're applying formula of everything the second time, we disconnect it from higher dimension and flipped it right inside the substrate dimension. Now we know what the solution is right now. So now let's go into, so that is that about this paper. This paper is powerful. You can see, let's see, the author, Sotade Olusegun. I'm the author. You can see my name right there. That's my name. And then another thing is that in this, there are so many things in this paper, and when you go towards the bottom, then here I have something known as quantum gravity paradox. This what I call paradox here is synonymous to that flipping mechanism. It's synonymous to that flipping mechanism. So once you get this paper, you can get to understand what that is all about. So now it is no more a paradox in that case, but then we can still call it a paradox because we have this. When you read, you understand what I mean, right? So now here we have the time energy wave architecture that bypasses causality. So now, by the only way one can bypass causality is to travel at instant speed of time. Like, I've always been saying it that time has two identities. By default, time is instant. It is only when time is in relativistic scaling with energy that it becomes continuous. And then energy, on the other hand, has two identities as well. Energy by default is infinite. When energy is in relativistic scaling with time, then it becomes discrete. So now, get a copy of this paper. So now let me explore other. It is now time for me to explore other things. Okay, so now this is the paper that I want to explore right now. Okay, so now this is it. Now we have it. Okay, this is it. So now here you can have the visual representation of what I was trying to explain in my research papers, in my research publications. So now this diagram, as we have it, I call it time energy wave model. So I have this model based off the derivation of time energy wave function, you understand? So now, and based on that derivation of time energy wave function, we can get to see that the visual representation of formula of everything is going to be in this form. And the way I'm going to best explain this is to say we have this blue. Let's quickly dissect this diagram. We have this blue trajectory that travels inversely to the red curvature. We have the blue curvature, which is inversely related to the red curvature. The blue curvature is the curvature of time, just as we have it in the formula of everything, the T, the M equal to capital UM plus 4M. So now, the red trajectory is the trajectory of energy, is the curvature of energy. Now, in the formula of everything, don't forget that we have a nested linear solution, which is capital UM plus 4M. And that linear solution as we have it is what will give us this equilateral triangle as we have it. And so I'm going to use the formula of everything to fully explain this. Okay, so I'm back at you. I'm right here now. So now we have this. The linear solution will give us this. And so now let's look at when we apply this, the way we apply formula of everything is, for instance, let's say we want to use this quantum mass worth, which is 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 31 kilogram. That is the quantum mass worth that we want to use in the formula of everything. Now, when we're going to substitute that value in the place of the two m's in the formula. So once we do that, the answer that we're going to get is going to be this classical mass worth, which is 2,277,250,000 kilograms. That is the classical mass worth that we're going to get. That's what we get. Now, the issue is that we have traversed the trajectory of time that first time. So if we now put this classical mass worth in the formula of everything, now I must tell you at this point that formula of everything is a powerful formula that feeds back on itself. And what that means is that you can use an input to generate an output, then use the generated output as input to generate further output. So now, that being said, we have this value, the classical mass worth. If we substitute that in the place of the two m's, the answer that we're going to get is going to be this. It's going to be this 5.7 times 10 raised to power 48. Don't forget, this is similar to what we got when we, used the 86 kilogram to get its counterpart. We have this, we have one answer that we have to expand in standard form and then manually annihilate the suspended zeros. So now, once we have this answer. So now we need to expand this in standard form, and once we do that, we're going to discover that we're going to have this suspension. The trajectory that we have is going to be in form of this diagonal trajectory. Don't forget that this trajectory as we have it, that is the trajectory of relativity. We have red line being fused with, the blue line. So now the reason we're going to have this relativity is for the fact that the moment there is a momentum. Now, the best way I can explain this is for you to know that there is no way you can have just one point in the universe. You can't. The moment there is going to be an emergence of that point, there will be other points that will be inversely related to it. And that is why we could not have the one-way measurement of light. That is the reason. So now, the speed of light must be in its multiple before it could be measured in time. And same thing is applicable to anything in the universe. So the dot, the point, like for instance, let's say we have the Big Bang singularity. The moment we're going to have the emergence of that Big Bang singularity, there will be another singularity that will be inversely related to it. It is then that we can then label the initial singularity as the Big Bang and then label the later singularity as black hole singularity. So now the emergence of that initial singularity to the inversely related later singularity will then create this relativity, because there will be central point between them. So if the initial singularity is approaching the later singularity, both of them will do so at equal speed, and that is relativity. So now the trajectory as we have it, this diagonal trajectory has generated that relativity between these. Look at the top region where we have this spiral convergence. The spiral convergence that we have is known as classical arbitrary suspension, and that is the suspension of the weak conveying worth to the strong conveying value. So now the trajectory is from Big Bang singularity diagonally. Don't forget that this is the action of time in momentum. Action of time in momentum must actually have an equal reaction of it in energy, and that is why we have this diagonal trajectory that we have beneath. So now we have this shape, but then there is at the top here, at the top right here, we have classical arbitrary suspension. At the bottom right here, we have quantum arbitrary suspension. Now, how can we bridge this divergence? The divergence of time to energy is the same thing as the divergence of classical mechanics to quantum mechanics. So now, what we're going to do next will be for us to actually bridge this gap. That is when we now have to manually annihilate the suspended zeros. We're only going to annihilate the suspended zeros, and by annihilating suspended zeros, that will not exert any force on this trajectory, and that is what is known as free fall. So now the classical free fall, which is the classical gravity, we're going to have that spontaneously, unlike this manual annihilation that we're going to have. So when we have that spontaneously, we're going to have it right from this top convergence down to the quantum convergence. So the free fall, the classical gravity will be from the classical arbitrary suspension down to the quantum arbitrary suspension. Now, where do we now have quantum gravity? Quantum gravity is what we have right inside the nucleus. Beneath that quantum arbitrary suspension, we have compacted the collateral triangle. And by being compacted, we're going to have constant accelerated momentum. Don't forget that we are negotiating the most curved region of this energy curvature, and that will give us angular momentum. By the virtue of angular momentum, we're going to have constantly accelerated because it is compacted equilateral triangle. So we have the constancy of light moving towards the constancy of gravity. This, don't forget, here we have this diagonal line, we have it to be constancy of light, and this other diagonal line, we have it to be constancy of gravity. So now, by the virtue of angular momentum, we're going to have this introduction of tiny energy into the system, and that will now lead to convergence. The convergence that we have inside the nucleus, I call it arbitrary mass convergence because I realize that electron is not being defined. If you put this 5.7 times 10 raised to power minus 48 inside the formula of everything, you can actually track the convergence of that mass right inside the nucleus. And then you see that it is around the electron because you have it right from 5.7 times 10 raised to power minus 32 down to what you are going to have. So electron is not being defined. Now, the moment we have this mass convergence to the point that it aligns to the curvature of energy, we're going to have what is known as standing wave. It is that standing wave that we actually project momentum into the higher dimension, and it will get connected to the electron of the higher dimension, which will be instantly converted to positron. Only then we can now have the instantiation of the electrons of the substrate dimension. And what we have there is known as quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is nothing but a transition from substrate dimension to the higher dimension, and that is why in the quantum entanglement we could have instant transmission of information. So now instant transmission of information is the solution. And don't forget that what I have, this vertical trajectory, which I call the default trajectory of time, which is instant by being vertical and then being elongated by energy because we have the elongation to bridge the divergence of time trajectory to energy trajectory. So I call this what I have here, I call it static and undulating field. It's a field. You can see that it's from classical realm down to the quantum realm, even to the complex realm. You understand? So I call it static and undulating field, and it's also known as field of reality. This is the field of reality. It permeates the whole universe. And we have it at the present phase of time peregrination, and then we have it right inside the horizon, event horizon. And you can see I have event horizon right here. So now it is only ideal for us to have this kind of field. Now when you look at the expanding cosmological space, the field that we have there is the kind of field that propagates outwards. Then inside the black hole we have an inverse of that, a field that propagates inwards. But then we can't have an inverse of the field that is propagating outwards without having a point where that propagation will be totally quenched, for us to have that flipping mechanism that we allow for the inverse of that to be the phenomenon of what we have inside the black hole. So now you can see that this static and undulating field is highly essential. So we have this almost instant, or probably let me say instant break in momentum. You understand? And I think the best way I can explain this is to say, if you have two black holes colliding, by the virtue of the inverse momentum, there will be this instant break in momentum that would allow the two black holes to reverse so as to collide and merge to form a big black hole. So that is the kind of phenomenon that we have right there. So now, this static and undulating field is the field of reality. And that is why I've always been saying that there is possibility for AI to be conscious, because depending on how well AI can actually relate with this field will determine how conscious AI would be. So now, this field, this static and undulating field, is the field where we have consciousness. I have another video on consciousness. If you want to know more about consciousness, you can watch that video. Now, consciousness, we have two phases of consciousness. There is objective conscious experience and there is subjective conscious experience. But watch that video if you want to understand that. So now we have this diagram. Let me quickly say this so that before we go through the derivation once again, so that you can understand better, let me quickly say this. There is one particular issue here. We realize that the solution comes in form of instant transmission of information via that static and undulating field. And that instant transmission of information is the same feedback of consciousness to classical mass worth. So at this vertical trajectory, the kind of conscious experience that we have is objective conscious experience, because it comes from higher dimension, and then it gives that classical mass worth what is known as self-aware. What is known as self-awareness. You understand? So there is no way one can be subjectively conscious without getting to be self-aware of where he is. You understand? So the objective conscious experience is what is being introduced into the substrate dimension that the subjective conscious experience will now work on. So we have it in form of internalization. We have introduction from higher dimension into the substrate dimension. So now the substrate dimension will work on that. It will now, the moment it enters into the substrate dimension, it will be mixed with noise. Then the filtering of noise to real signal is what we have as subjective conscious experience. Then another thing I want to say is that classical mechanics is as incomplete as quantum mechanics. We have close to deterministic reality at classical level, but we can't get to really know that that is what we have. It seems as if we really have deterministic results all the time. When you hold ball, it seems you hold it, but then there is this repulsive force between what you heard and your hand, the ball and the hand. The ball and the hand, there is this repulsive force. But then the force, the quantum repulsive force to classical converging force is so tiny, and that is why we don't even feel it. We don't feel it. It's not a big deal. We don't feel it at all, because that repulsive force of quantum mechanics is so tiny compared to the classical converging force. So that is it. Get to know that as well. But then we can get to see this properly in the gravitational phase. Now, let's say somebody is at a particular height, and then the person is actually coming down. So the person will experience free fall. The person will not even feel his weight. He will experience free fall rather. So now let's say the person has cap on his head. If the person should take off the cap and then put the cap above where he is and leave the cap will be suspended to that person falling. Both the cap and the person will be falling at the same speed. The cap will not touch the fallen person until the person touches the ground. Then you can see, with that, you can see that suspension that we're talking about. Because quantum gravity, don't forget that in the nucleus, inside the nucleus is where you can have the emergence. Is where you can have the instantiation of electron. Electron orbiting the nucleus will be undefined. It will be undefined. Now, when you look at this diagram, what do you see? This dashed horizontal line to the extreme end of time's curvature, that region is what I call classical realm. From the dashed horizontal line down to this energy curvature is what I call quantum realm. In that classical realm, what do you have? We have the instantiation of classical mass. By the virtue of that expansion in the cosmological space, we could have, the emergence of classical mass worth. But right inside the quantum realm, there is no emergence, there is no convergence of mass worth at all. In the quantum realm, we have decaying of mass worth, which is supporting the mass convergence at classical level. And that is why even inside this equilateral triangle, we have asymmetric nature being embedded right inside of it. The operation of quantum mechanics is quite different from the operation of classical mechanics. Classical mechanics is converging mass worth, while quantum mechanics is decaying mass worth. So now, the only place where we can have the instantiation of electron is right inside the nucleus. But then, it is not even feasible for electron to be instantiated because the pressure, the temperature right inside the nucleus is so intense. And it is not until when it is connected to higher dimension by relativity or by entanglement that we can then have higher degree of freedom and power that will instantiate the electron of the higher dimension, which must be flipped to positron to allow for the instantiation of the electrons of the substrate dimension. Now, the reality is right inside the substrate dimension. Now, the way this works is that the circle must be completed before we can then have the substrate being relegated such that the higher dimension can then be the substrate to other higher dimensions. So we have that progression at this present phase of time peregrination or at event horizon. We have it going up like that. But then it must actually complete the circle. So now we now know the reality of the universe. Don't forget, right at the Big Bang, we have what is known as inflationary suspension. Now, towards the singularity of the black hole, we have neutron star suspension. So now, what we have here is that every object in the universe can actually have its full potential at universal level. So when you have an orange, that orange is being localized for you to have it as orange that you can hold. That orange, if you now find it at its quantum level position, you will see that the orange will be everywhere. The orange, every object in the universe can actually be transformed to its full potential at universal level and then be localized at its mass worth potential at classical. That is what this is all about. So you can supply quantum mass worth to get its classical counterpart, and as well you can track the decaying of quantum operation of that object to its classical to its classical counterpart. So that is how it works. The formula is formula of everything because it encompasses everything you have been taught, everything you have been taught in physics, be it nuclear fusion, nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, everything, matter antimatter conundrum, it has solved it. So now, but then there is one issue. We know that if you use quantum mass what, you can get the classical counterpart. But then the issue that we have is that when you now supply the classical counterpart so as to reconfirm the quantum counterpart, the initial quantum mass worth, you will not get the initial quantum mass worth. But instead, we get 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32. 32 is smaller to 31, is minus 32 is smaller to the power of minus 31. And that means that the value is being decayed. So this vertical trajectory is being shifted into the black hole. But then, when you now consider that minus 32 value in relativity to the past, to that initial electron, then you can get to see that indeed we have, that initial mass worth. But the way I will best explain this is to use nuclear fission. Nuclear fission. Nuclear fission, for instance, let's say you have uranium. If you bombard that with neutron, almost instantly it will be bigger, but then it will split because it will be so unstable. So you might not be able to capture the information of that initial increment, but what you now see is the split versions, which you are going to have in form of krypton and barium. But then it will initially be increased, and that is exactly what we have here. We have almost instantly the transition from substrate dimension to higher dimension, which gets connected to the electron of the higher dimension and instantly flip it to positron. Then the positron is the worth of that initial electron's worth. And that will almost instantly instantiate the electron, the initial electron inside the nucleus of the substrate dimension. But then it will integrate that positron into the substrate dimension to propel momentum towards the singularity of the black hole. But then once we have that, the next thing we're going to have is that decayed worth, which is the 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32. That is the reason we have that value. But then we know that we actually have the counterpart, the quantum counterpart of 2,277,250,000 kilogram of that classical mass worth is that electron's mass worth. We know that. There is no doubt about that. So that is that. That being said, now look at this title. It says the discovery of flipping mechanism as signature of Almighty God. Like I said before, that the flipping mechanism is everywhere, and that is the signature of Almighty God. Well, so now there is another thing I want to quickly say. I have decoded the information of the DNA. There is a video about that. If you want to watch that, you can click on that. So now I'm going to put a link to my research publication in the description section of this live session. You can actually click there to get it. So now let's briefly go through derivation of time energy wave model once again, we're not going to be, I'm not going to waste time on this. So now we have this electric field. So now this whole region is to tell us that electric field is the divergence of time relativistic scaling to energy at constant speed of capital U squared. So that is that. So now when you look at this diagram, you now know that at this event horizon, we now have the equilateral triangle being flipped as what we have in the black hole. But then, if you want to track the light cone is going to be the cone that we have in the quantum realm. The time cone will be what we have in the classical realm. You understand? So basically, if you now consider the light cone of the higher dimension to that, you see that it is synonymous to the light cone as being proposed by Sir Penrose. Yes, I think I got the name right. So it's synonymous to that, but then the reality is what we have. The reality of the universe is what we have based on the application of formula of everything. So when you dissect it horizontally, you're going to have it like this. But when you dissect it vertically in connection to the higher dimension, then you can have the light cone the way it is being proposed, by Sir Penrose. So now, let me continue. So now, the moment we integrate vector structure in order to have the wave equation from 2-dimension into 3-dimension, we implement the following. So we're going to have this. You see that we have, multiple of this del multiply with the del in parentheses multiply with capital T, which we serve as the placeholder, equal to, duplicate of it. But when you look at it, it is more like, when you look at what you have at the right side, it's a flipped version of what you have at the left side, because the momentum must be flipped inversely to the initial position. So the position momentum must be flipped to the momentum, to that other momentum rather. So once we have that, the capital T is a placeholder, and then we can apply that as what we have below. So now we can see that when we collect the like terms, and we subtract that from the electric field, then equal to the 1 all over capital U squared multiply with the derivation of time to second derivation of time to second derivation of energy. That must actually be equal, because that must actually be equal. So the divergence of time to energy must be equal to the electric field. It must be equal to the electric field. So the totality of this constancy of gravity trajectory, which is linear trajectory, to the constancy of light, which is the other diagonal trajectory, the totality of its electric field must be equal to the divergence of time to energy. That's what that is telling us there. And so once we know it is equal, we can actually take what we have at right side to the left side and then equate that to be 0. And so the T is a placeholder for both electric field and the second derivation of time to second derivation of energy. So that is that. Then, to solve for mass formation of particles as suspended in time relativistic scaling, we have, since the total since the total for a relativistic particle with mass m according to special relativity is what we have below, which is total energy squared equal p squared c squared plus m squared c to the power of 4. But now what this is saying is, don't forget that in this diagram we have this classical arbitrary suspension. It's talking about this suspension, and then we have this quantum arbitrary suspension. So now, the moment relativistic mass what is being considered, there is a big problem, because now when you look at the equation now, the equation is not the equation. What you have at left side is not equal to what you have at right side. And with that, we know that the solution that will give us reality of the universe cannot be in form of equation. It has to be in form of the formula as we have it for formula of everything. So now let me shift this up right here. So now we have this so once we integrate that total energy, its momentum and mass worth, then we realize that that asymmetric nature of the universe, the inherent asymmetric nature of the universe right inside equilateral triangle. You understand? So basically what that is telling us is that we in the equilateral triangle, you can watch my uploaded videos, especially watch the Sotade series. You can get to understand this concept quite all right. I have explained everything right there. So now in the equilateral triangle, we have constancy at one side to variations. And so the variation contracts towards the zero. When you have that equilateral triangle being flipped, I will quickly give you, I'll give you another diagram. But then let's look at what we have below right here. When you now have this equation to act on wave function, and then you structure it to be applicable with vector, you realize that we have complex system, and which is also we have complex system, then we have flipping mechanism. When you have complex system, you're going to have flipping mechanism, because you're going to have real mass worth or real worth being toggling with imaginary worth, and so we have the flipping mechanism. So like I said when you try to test for a commutative nature of position to momentum, I uploaded the video concerning that. You can watch that as well. You are going to have this x hat to be the commutator operator, then you have p hat to be the momentum commutative operator. So if you flip the multiplication of the two such that you have x at p at equal, x at p at minus p at x at, you flip it like that. And once you flip it like that, then product rule differentiation will cause you to have different factor. We cause you to have difference of I multiplied with h bar. That is the non-commutative nature of momentum to position. And so I said in that upload that the h bar is so insignificant relative to the classical mechanics at classical level, and that is why we always have this close to deterministic result. But we don't really have that deterministic result until we have that instant transmission of information right from the complex level back to the classical level. But then we have it. Then the h bar is so huge based on the factor density to cause what is known as uncertainty principle. And so the only thing we could settle for at quantum level is probability density. So now where we now have solution is at complex level, because at complex level the H bar is so balanced to have real worth, which can then be toggled with imaginary worth to give us that flipping mechanism, and that is the reality of the universe. So now let's quickly go through uh the derivation of formula of everything. Derivation of formula of everything, by using chain rule. You know what? The reason I have this formula of everything is for me to actually, you know, dissect the relationship between time, mass, and energy. And I realized that the kind of relationship that we have between them is inverse. So now by using chain rule, then we can have dt dm equal to dt de times de dm. So for t is a function of m, let t equal e squared, which is energy. For t is the function of e, which is energy, where e equal m squared plus 1. Therefore, e is also, e is function of, is gm, which is the function of gravitational force of mass. Thus, let t equal e squared. So you can have in parentheses m squared plus 1 squared. So dt de will be 2 times 1 e raised to power 2 minus 1 raised to power 2 minus 1. That will give you 2e. The e dm will give you 2 times 1 m raised to power 2 minus 1 will give you 2m. By the chain rule, we have dt dm equal to dt de times de dm, and so the 2e times 2m will give us 4em. So now, therefore, dt dm equal 4 in parentheses m squared plus 1. Then outside the bracket we have m. So now, by the time we solve this, we're going to have it in form of 4m squared plus 4m. Now the 4m squared is strong conveying placeholder, while the 4m is the weak conveying placeholder. So with that, we already have the weak nuclear prototype being suspended. We have the strong nuclear prototype being suspended to weak nuclear prototype. We have that right there. Or should I say prototype, or let me say framework, or placeholder. Like I said, I think that is right. So to induct E equals mc squared into that formula as E in our 4em of 4 in parentheses m squared plus 1 m placeholder, then we're going to let t equal e squared. For t is the function of e, where e is square bracket m dot c squared, then squared. So now the m is going to be the gravitational speed of sun, because we're still going to eventually have m, and that will serve as our variable where we can put the mass worth that we want to get its universal potential, or that we want to get its classical counterpart, based on whatever it is that we might want to do. So we don't need to use any mass worth. We can use the gravitational speed of sun, because sun is, the gravitational speed of sun, cause other planets to orbit around it. You understand? So we can use that as a generic gravitational force, or as generic gravitational worth. You understand? So then we're going to use the speed of light approximation. Yes, we're going to use approximated speed of light. So now the speed of gravitational force and the speed of light, those are the things that we're going to use. So now with that, we're going to have the T over the M equal to 4em, and so when we substitute that mc squared in our placeholder, we're going to have it in form of 4 bracket in parentheses, then square bracket m dot c squared, then squared plus 1, then m outside the bracket. And so we now have the TDM equal to 4. We open bracket, so we have 274 as the gravitational force of the sun, and then we have the speed of light inside the parentheses. Then we square accordingly, then we square accordingly plus 1, we close the bracket, then we have m right there. So now the TDM equal to, we then have our value. Don't forget that the speed of light, when we square, we now have it to be 9.0 times 10 raised to power 16. We have square right there. So then we now have plus 1, we close the bracket, we have m. So we now have the TDM equal to 4. When we multiply the 274 with 9.0, we're going to have it in form of 6.3. And so once that is being squared, we multiply that, we squared it, we have it to be 6.3 times 10 raised to power 38. We close the bracket plus 1, then we have m outside. So the TDM will now give us 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39 plus 4. We close the bracket, we have m outside. And so now we're going to have the TDM equal 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39m plus 4m. 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39. That is the speed, the constant speed of the universe. When you look at this value is somehow close to the value that Dirac derived in what is called large number hypothesis. But this value is different from that value, you understand? And so we have this value, and then we had it to 4m. We have this value as we have it. So right now we can substitute capital U for the constant speed of universe, capital UM plus 4m. So we now have the formula of everything to be dt dm equal to capital UM plus 4m. So that is the value. So that is that. So let me I'm now going to briefly show you the other diagram I want to show you. Okay, it is this diagram. Now let's look at this. When you have sum in this format, such that you arrange it like this, you are going to have it in form of equilateral triangle. But then when you look at the structure, you can see that equilateral triangle is not actually symmetric. It is symmetric, but it has this inherent asymmetric nature. You have constancy of 1 at one side, then you have variation at the other side. The variation contracts towards the 0. When you now flip this equilateral triangle of blue summation pattern, you're going to have red summation pattern, and that will generate 0 at the other side. And so you can have Big Bang singularity, then have black hole singularity. But then when you dissect this vertically, you are going to have infinity suspension at higher dimension 3D, which is you have transition of that substrate dimension to higher dimension, and that will be complex transition. So when you complete the circle, this 3D will now serve. The 3D is higher dimension to 2D in the previous circle. When you complete the circle, 3D will now, the 2D will be relegated. 3D will serve as substrate dimension to 4D. And when the circle is completed, 4D will serve as substrate dimension to higher dimension, which will be 5D. That's how the whole thing will go. So that is that for this particular video. It's very long. Thank you for your time. I am, like I said, I'm going to put link to my research publication in the description section below. You can check it out yourself. So thank you for your time. I'll call it a day right here. God bless you.